Hi, I'm Charles Clark. Now, when we think about getting a handle on the health of our virtualization environment, we often think about a couple of things. We think about monitoring, we think about state, we think about alerts, we think about performance metrics and graphs. But what I would like to talk to you about today is really the long game. Looking at that data with a historical perspective, this is going to help us make the right decisions for our virtualization environment going forward. The Veeam management pack for VMware includes a number of different mechanisms to help us really understand that data and fast track us to those right decisions. So let me show you a couple of examples. You can see here I'm looking inside the Ops Manager console. I'm looking at the reporting node, and on the left hand side here you can see that I've imported the Veeam management pack for VMware. That includes a number of different reporting folders that contain different reports. So, for example, I may look at performance history reports. Now, what performance history reports are going to do is, as its name suggests, show you performance history for a particular metric, and it follows a fairly standard format that you can probably imagine. So if I look at, for example, here's performance history for this is CPU performance history for virtual machines. I'm looking actually at CPU ready percentage as a metric. You can see I'm looking from the first day of the year up to today for all the virtual machines inside the server's resource pool, and I'm interested in the CPU ready percentage metric. And I can trend that over time. I can see, since the start of the year, actually, monitoring for this VM picked up sort of mid-February. I can track that CPU ready percentage, see that over time, and that's going to help me spot spikes. Maybe there's something that's particularly CPU intensive at a particular time of the week or time of the month that I want to be aware of, and that sort of historical trending can help me do that. But this is the kind of traditional performance history graphing and reporting that you may already be familiar with. I want to show you some new stuff. I want to show you some stuff that I think is quite clever and presents the data in a way that really makes it more actionable than simply looking at performance graphs. So the node that I'm going to focus on here is the VMware Analysis Reports node. You can see that we've included a range of reports. This is all out of the box, everything I'm showing you today, a range of analysis reports. And I just want to highlight some of these and use them as examples. Now, we saw a moment ago the performance history for relating to CPU. So I can use that to make good choices about how to provision virtual machines inside my environment and where I may be able to squeeze resources from inside the virtual environment. We call it Veeam, in the Veeam management pack, we call that process right sizing. And let me just give an example of that report. So here I want to look at historical data for from the first day of this month up to today. I want to look at that data with relation to VRAM and to vCPU. I'll come on and talk about storage a wee bit later on. And I want to see, up to 25. You can see that I've at the moment I've selected one resource pool here. I'm just going to add a second resource pool and include that in the report results. So I just do that like so. It's very simple. So I've got a resource pool called servers, and I'm just going to add that, and everything that's inside that server's resource pool gets included in the report. I go ahead and run that. So this is just using SQL, the SCOM data warehouse, System Center Ops Manager data warehouse. It's all standard SQL techniques. If you have other ways of interrogating the SQL database that contains the data warehouse, then that will work too. Okay, so here we've got the report. I'll just zoom that out a wee bit. So it's split into two sections, one for the RAM analysis and one for CPU analysis. And in summary, you can see that for the virtual machines that I've analyzed, I'm going to be able to claim back about 4.6 gigs of RAM on the hosts, across the hosts where those virtual machines are resident. So I mean, that's kind of a big deal. I mean, 4.6 gigs of RAM might represent another virtual machine that I can squeeze into that space. Now, we look at that data from another angle in the capacity planning reporting, but here it's very easy for me to see and identify the virtual machines that I can ask to budge up, if you like, closer to each other in terms of their resource utilization, so that I can potentially either make room for additional virtual machines or alleviate a performance bottleneck. Now, it may be that the recommendation for RAM allocation hasn't quite taken into account any particular spikes or monthly processing or something along those lines. So what we can do, for example, is just maximize the node here for this particular virtual machine and look at the trend, look to see if there's anything in the reporting interval that I should be aware of that might indicate that the results are being skewed one way or another. Here you can see the line's really flat, so we can see that the maximum memory utilization has only been about 3.8 gig. It's been allocated 8 gig of RAM, so I can pull 3.2 gigs away from that virtual machine and lend it to other resources. And we do the same thing for CPU, and now they allow the sort of analysis over time of that CPU utilization and reclaim vCPUs that I can then allocate more appropriately to other resources. So you can see that we right size for oversized virtual machines. We can also do right sizing for undersized virtual machines. So a great way to, rob from Peter and pay Paul essentially is to downsize the oversized virtual machines and then upsize the undersized virtual machines. And we're really putting that intelligence, right there in the reporting in front of you. Now, another couple of reports that I really like when I'm trying to squeeze the best out of my virtualization environment is the ability to identify virtual machines that I may not need anymore, or virtual machines that perhaps I can Veeam zip and then archive off somewhere else. So here's the switched off virtual machines report. I'm just going to run this from the first day of the previous quarter up to today to give myself plenty of historical data to work with, and I'm just going to include all the virtual machines. And so this is going to show me the virtual machines that are probably switched off. So it's virtual machines that we haven't been able to get any performance data or any metric data from over the course of the reporting interval, or virtual machines that may have suffered downtime or have been switched off. Okay, and I'll just zoom that out a wee bit. So here you can see the list of probably not running virtual machines. And we can also conveniently see the disk space that they've been allocated. So as I'm looking to move virtual machines around, perhaps move them onto lower tier storage, I can see the virtual machines that perhaps aren't being used or have been switched off or for whatever reason don't seem to have any activity, identify them at a glance and see how much disk space I might be able to save by archiving away that virtual machine and removing it from my expensive storage. Okay, now when it comes to storage and sort of right sizing for storage, there's a couple of really cool techniques that the Veeam Management Pack includes to help us do that. So let's look, for example, at space utilization first of all. And I'm going to run this report, the data store space usage heat map. You can see that I'm going to run that just against a single data store for the last month. I'm going to look at the threshold, the growth threshold unit in gigabytes. So let me just kick this off. Okay, and what this is going to show us for that data store is a heat map drawn out, color-coded, that is going to show me the relationship of the virtual machines that are on that data store. So the size of the block represents the size of the virtual machine relative to each other, and the color represents the rate of growth of that virtual machine. So the deeper the shade of green for each block, then the faster the rate of growth. So for example, you can see that virtual machine number 1 here, which is AU replica demo 01 replica, it's fairly small. It's only about 9 gig in size roughly. but has been growing fairly significantly over the course of the reporting interval. In fact, it's experienced a 20% rate of growth, and that's why it's represented by a darker color inside the report output here. Now, we can also analyze from a storage perspective that sort of data, but with relation to performance. So I'm just going to look at the performance heat map here. You can see that I have the threshold set for latency over the same reporting interval. I'm going to look at all my data stores here, so it's going to take a moment longer to run. Okay, and here are the results. If I just zoom that out just a wee bit. So I can look at each data store. You can see they're all listed down the left hand side, and then I can look at the results for that data store. So I see for the reporting interval a sort of brief summary of IOPS and latency, and then underneath you can see again the color coded chart that is going to show me, based on the color, the sort of fastest growth of IOPS and the fastest growth of latency for the objects that were included inside the report. So, I may, for example, look at this virtual machine, and I can see that the latency for that is growing, very quickly relative to the other virtual machines. And so then I could come in and look at the details for that specific virtual machine, and using the collection rules that define the parameters of the report. So here you can see them for the disks for the virtual machine across those different metrics. You can see that graphed out, and I can use that as the basis for my analysis. Okay, now the other thing that I want to be able to identify over time is who my troublemakers are inside my virtual environment. So, over the course, a sort of common request is, last month, where did most of my troubles come from in my VMware environment? Because that's going to help me with resource and staff allocation for next month, because we may imagine that some of those may carry over. So we have two ways of looking at that with the Veeam Management Pack for VMware reporting. The first is to identify who the top troublemakers are. So I'm just going to look as a reporting interval across the last week, and I want to look at the vSphere. Actually, I'll look at virtual machines for this report, and I'm going to look at the top 20. Okay, and here we can see the top troublemakers inside my VMware environment. So the number one troublemaker seems to be this SQL Server. So I can drill in and see what it is specifically on that SQL Server that seems to be causing issues. So this data is built on alert data, and what we're doing is analysis, of the alerts, analysis of them over time, and looking at the repeat count for those alerts, and then essentially summarizing that data for you and presenting it. So I can see that EU SQL 01 is a troublemaker, and I can see that the main trouble that it suffers from is a CPU based on CPU usage analysis. We've got 755 alerts that relate to that. So I may look to go in and look historically at the alerts for those, for that SQL box, or just go in and either provision some more CPU resource for it or adjust the thresholds so that the alert doesn't get generated in the first place. Looking at that from the other way around, I may want to identify what my top troubles are. So what is across, for example, my vSphere hosts, what are the top issues that my hosts seem to be suffering from? And I can just go ahead and pull that data out. So here, as I look across all my hosts, you can see that my top issue seems to be memory usage analysis. Not a massive surprise there. And again, I can drill in and see which hosts in particular seem to be generating many alerts for memory usage analysis. So it looks like the EU SUP ESX01 is my top, only just my top host that seems to be suffering from that particular issue. So, those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it, if I can paraphrase George Santayana. But looking at that history and having it presented to me in a way that I can really make sense of as a VMware administrator or as a NOC operator is something that the Veeam Management Pack really excels at, I think. And again, it's about letting you make the right decisions about your VMware environment quickly using historical data from your own environment. Thank you.